Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another event
Recording in
hosted
progress.
by FEU English Language Circle. I am Juan Miguel Enriquez, the ELC president, and I will be one of the moderators for today's event. Before we begin, I would like everyone to be reminded of the following guidelines. Next slide, please. Always be on time. Dress appropriately. A webinar is a formal engagement in an online setting. Check your Wi-Fi connection before joining the webinar or online training. Use appropriate equipment for the webinar. When using a mobile phone, use a headset to reduce the noise that they pick in your location. Avoid using the speakerphone. Put your phone on silent or airplane mode. Avoid taking a call when the webinar is ongoing. Use the mute button to prevent unnecessary noise that will disrupt the program. Release the unmute button when it's time for you to speak during the question and answer forum. When asking a question, state your name and your affiliation first before throwing in your questions. Also, speak with clarity. Be courteous and do not engage in a chat with others while the webinar is ongoing. The organizers reserve its right to disengage anyone from the webinar who will not follow the given guidelines.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sayrine Vigilia, and I am one of your moderators for this webinar. Language has been one of the driving factors in our society, and with that, it also continues to become one of the main proponents for progress. Today's webinar will focus on the issues of language, gender, and power, and shall discuss the ways in which language is used to, unfortunately, marginalize different genders, especially non-conforming ones. More specifically, the issues of manipulating language to maintain and propagate oppression towards groups other than the status quo, like women and the LGBTQIA+ community, will be given a detailed discussion in this webinar. I hope you are as excited as I am because my feminist self is beyond belief right now. I encourage everyone to make use of the reaction feature on Zoom and just send in some hearts or a round of applause or whatever encapsulates what you feel about our speaker and the participants. But before we jump right into that very exciting discussion, may I call on the Secretary of English Language Circle, Jericho Kurugan, for the opening prayer.
Thank you, Miss Irene. So let us all remember that we are in the holy presence of the Lord. Father God in heaven, we thank you for this day. As we continue this webinar entitled Issues on Language, Power, and Gender in Society, we are praying for a successful event despite the challenging situations that you have orchestrated for us. Leading us to this point of momentous event, we thank you for your protection and guidance that you have bestowed upon us through this much difficult pandemic. Despite the extreme odds and difficulties that we have encountered along the way, you have never ceased to make your presence known and comfort us with your everlasting peace and support. Lord, all the praises and honors that we will receive from this event are meant to be used for your greater glory. May we be able to carry the wisdom that you have granted to us. May you empower us to walk to the future with faith and hope. Guide us in changing the world for the better good. We are humbly asking for your mighty hands to bless upon us and this event. All of these we ask through the intercession of Far Eastern University. In the mighty name of our Lord, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Jericho. Now, to provide us with some welcoming remarks, I am so glad to introduce a former professor of mine. I always looked forward to attending her class when I was a freshman. She is a coordinator for the Gender and Development Desk of Far Eastern University, Ms. Amira Di Maxil Milano.
Thank you, Sai. I was so grateful and happy to hear that. Okay, so to start and welcome you, good afternoon, good day. Before starting off, I just want to ask you to reflect. Why do we need to know, define, delve deeper, and participate on the issues of language, power, gender in society? Surely, all of our instant answers are matter of perspectives. But at majority, it is simple. We need to scale the impact of gender equity now. And those are words often uttered in social justices circles and recently across headlines, especially amidst the pandemic. If gender equality is the end, gender equity is the means. Gender equality does not mean that women and men will become the same, but that women's LGBTQIA plus, men's rights, responsibilities, and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born male or female. Gender equity means fairness of treatment for women, LGBTQIA plus, and men according to their respective needs. This may include equal treatment or treatment that is different, but which is considered equivalent in terms of rights, benefits, obligations, and opportunities. On the path to gender equality, we need gender equity. But in order for have to gender equity, we need to change the narrative that is produced by the unacceptable status quo. We need to redefine the language. We need to see where are the powers inside those language. And from that, it is not just merely looking into fixing the women or fixing the LGBT community, but it is about fixing the ecosystem, fixing the institutions through defining truly and clearly what are the issues that pertains to it or that make it more wicked at all levels, individuals, family, universities, companies, and country. May this talk, this webinar be of optimum on asking ourselves at the end of the day, are we building or have we truly built an authentic environment for equity, diversity, and inclusion? Let us rethink our culture and let our consciousness sit to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Miss A. You never fail to deliver information and inspiration. Now, to formally introduce our guest speaker for today, I am handing over the virtual floor to the Public Relations Officer of ELC, Margaret Bautista.
Thank you, Ate Cyrene. To give us an in-depth discussion on the nexus of language, power, and gender, and the issues surrounding the aforementioned concepts in our society, we have invited over a speaker who may seem very familiar to the eyes of some Tamaraws here with us today, as she is a proud faculty member of Far Eastern University, teaching language and research-related courses. She has conducted tutorials and trainings in basic and academic English, business correspondence and communication, public speaking, technical writing, cross-cultural communication, and personality development. She has also conducted review programs for TOEFL and IELTS and was a program consultant and materials developer for International Education Institute and IBY School for International Development. She graduated with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Education, major in English, and has a master's degree in English, major in language instruction. She has been in the academe since 1994 and is currently pursuing her PhD in English Studies at the University of the Philippines. Much pertinent to our topic today, her research interests include critical discourse analysis, gender, media literacy, and linguistic landscapes. She is no other than our very own Miss Mycah Chavez. Let us give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. When I was invited to speak about gender, power, and language, I was so excited because language and gender are both my passions. So when I was preparing for this, I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to discuss, but gender is such a big topic, so I had to choose those that are really relevant to the issues that we are facing today. Okay, so let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes po.
Okay, so for the outline of my presentation, I will be talking about gender construction, ideology and gender, and of course, language and gender. But first of all, let's look at the definitions of sex and gender. Sex is defined as a biological categorization based on reproductive potential, whereas gender is the social elaboration of biological sex. So we look at sex as biological while gender is social. But actually, gender builds on biological sex and exaggerates biological difference and brings it to domains which are actually irrelevant. For example, there's no biological reason for women to mince their steps and for men to swagger or for women to paint their nails red. But our society thinks like that. There is no biological reason for women to wear skirts, but we do. Sex is based on actually anatomical and doctrinal and hormonal characteristics, and this is decided when we are born. But actually, the definition of male and female is social. The selection of criteria for sex assignment is based on cultural beliefs about what makes someone male or female. So, biology offers us a dichotomy of male and female, but does not explain that many individuals do not fit these two categories. For example, there are people born with unusual chromosome makeup or with two genitals or their genitals. For example, the penis is shorter than expected. For example, if your penis is 2.5 centimeters, that's not considered a penis. So what does one do? They have to do surgery so that it will conform to the prototype of male and female, male having a penis and female having a vagina. So science and biology has categorized us according to our genitals, and that is actually not biological or not natural, but is cultural and social. So what happens to anomalous babies if their penis is less than 2.5 centimeters, it's cut and then uh, an opening is made to resemble a vagina, or if a female has a clitoris of longer than 1 centimeter, it's also treated surgically. So this is how we conform to the categorization of male and female that are assumed to be uh, natural because it's biological, but actually it's not. Next, gender is not something we are born with and not something we have, but something we do or something we perform. And these are gendered performances that are actually available to everybody. For example, we copy girls copy their mothers and boys copy their fathers. So girls wear makeup and high heels and skirts, etc. But as I said, these gendered performances are available for everybody. However, society constrains who can perform these gendered activities. Now, let's look at uh, how gender is constructed. And it starts with dichotomous beginnings. First, the making of a man or a woman begins before birth, from the moment someone begins to wonder if the pending child is a boy or a girl. So if the pregnant woman looks pretty, oh, it may be a girl. So by just predicting what the gender of the child is, we are already being gendered. Our gender is already constructed, and it happens that uh, when the doctor declares, okay, you come out of this world, and the doctor says it's a boy, it's a girl. From that moment on, you are gendered, and you are forever a male or a female. So the gender is assigned to you. And this declaration of it's a boy or it's a girl is reminiscent of what Austin calls performatives, which are not only utterances that describe reality, but actually change our social reality. So when the doctor declares you're a boy, it's a boy, it is changed to he. And it's a girl, it is changed to she. So there you can see the role of language in our gendering from the time we are born. And another instance is the naming of children. So we are assigned names according to our gender. So there's female names and male names. So Mary for female, John for male, Mayumi and Magiting. But of course, nowadays we have names for girls that are actually used for boys in the past. For example, Max, Alex, Sam. And when girls are named using boys' names, we find them cute, right? But have you ever met a guy named Eleanor or Charlotte? If you ever do, you would find it funny, right? Because uh, we are more strict about gender roles when it comes to men. But if women behave like men, we find it cute, or sometimes we tolerate it because they're just women. Okay, another way of constructing gender is through the adults. Sex determination sets the stage for a lifelong process of gendering as the child becomes and learns how to be male or female. And as I said, adults are the first ones to do the gendering. For example, in nurseries, you are named baby boy Chavez or baby girl Chavez. So there you have a category already. And some hospitals go as far as addressing the baby boys with light blue and the baby girls with light pink. And that color coding goes on until we grow old. Also, the toys that our parents buy us are actually gendered. So girls receive dolls and guys receive guns or cars. And if a girl plays with a car, it's not considered conventional. Now, being a boy and being a girl is part of socialization. So at first, the adults do it for us. But as we grow a little bit older into childhood, we ourselves do our own gender acts by socializing. And with our interactions with playmates, with teachers, etc. Um, it would be difficult to interact with other people if we cannot attribute a gender to them. For example, how would you interact with the woman who gave birth to you if you do not gender her as a woman? Okay. Now, also, from infancy, male and female children are interpreted differently and interacted with differently. So when a boy is crying, for example, people will interpret it as, oh, the baby is angry. But when a girl is crying, people would say, oh, she's probably scared or hungry. So the way we interpret the actions of babies are already gendered. And then adults handle girls differently than boys. So we handle girls gently while boys playfully. And when we talk to girls, we use our small voices and we use diminutives like doggy, cutie. And when we talk to boys, it's usually prohibitive, like, no, don't do that, don't go there. Okay, so the way children are treated and talked to is differentiated according to their gender. And so with this differential treatment, boys and girls eventually learn to be different and engage in different activities, differentiated activities. For example, playing, wearing clothes, even the way we sit are already taught to us by our parents. Okay, if you're a girl, don't sit with your private part uh, welcoming the public. Okay, now by the age of 3, children begin to focus on the enterprise of growing up, which involves gender differentiation encoded in the words of assessment with which progress is monitored. What this means is when you do something good, your parents don't say good child or good person. They say good girl or good boy. So even our assessment in the things that we do are gendered. And we hear phrases like kababae mong tao or babae ka pa naman, magpakalalaki ka or nakakalalaki ka na. And then if you're male and you're not behaving as a male, like you're a little bit feminine, people would say, bakla ka ba? Or other people who pretend to accept other genders would say, uy, kahit bakla yan, matalino yan. So those words that we use differentiate people according to their gender. And for example, girls who behave like boys, we find them cute. But if boys behave like girls, it's not acceptable. So you can see already there's a divide in how we assess the behavior of boys and girls. So in the differentiation of gender, there happens to be the separation. So difference is reinforced by separation. For example, during playtime, girls play with girls and boys play with boys. But if girls play with boys, it's tolerated. However, if boys play with girls, they are teased because they're not supposed to do that. And adults perpetrate those kinds of behavior. Also, in school, for example, the uniform, we are gendered by the uniform prescribed by the school. So the girls wear skirt and the boys wear shorts. Other activities in school, for example, lining up. Okay, the lines of girls are different from the lines of boys, or in choosing teams, boys versus girls. So that separation happens in school, and the school reinforces that. Now, in the past, there were schools exclusive for girls and exclusive for boys, but now we have co-ed. But still, even if it's co-ed, the differentiation and the separation manifest in various activities, school activities. Because of their separation during a significant part of their childhoods, boys and girls are socialized into different peer cultures, and it results to different practices and different understanding of the world. And eventually different verbal cultures. So girls talk about different things than boys do. After elementary school, this marks the beginning of a social market that forms the basis of an emerging peer social order. And with this market comes a profound change in the terms of gender separation and difference. Excuse me. So what happens in this social order? the pairing of boys and girls begin to dominate the scene. So if in childhood there was separation and difference, in high school, girls and boys begin to be paired by different activities. And if during childhood, the parents, the adults were the ones who monitor the children's behavior, in high school, the peer social order takes control. And so boys become complementary and cooperative to girls as they see themselves in the structural system of evaluation. They want to belong, they want to be attractive, and so they do everything they can so that the opposite sex would find them worthy and they could be paired together. Um, Heterosexuality is the metaphor around which the pure social order organizes itself, and a heterosexual market becomes the center of the emerging pure social order. But what is this heterosexual uh, market? The participants in this heterosexual market can be paired up or negotiate the pairing of others. In other words, when you are in this heterosexual market, you can either be a commodity or a broker. Now, who can be the commodities? These are the beautiful girls, smart girls, fair skinned, uh, not too tall girls, uh, uh, petite, and then who are the what do you call this, the marketable boys, the strong, tall, darker than girls. So you have this valuation that enables you to be paired with the opposite sex. But what if you're not pretty, you're not well built, etc.? You don't have those attractive qualities, then you will not be a commodity. Instead, you will be the broker. You will be the ones to negotiate the pairing of others. In Tagalog, what we call that, the tulay. Okay, you pair other people. So I'm sure you've experienced that in high school when you pair your classmate with another. And so you become the broker of this heterosexual market. Now, these activities in this market establish a system of hierarchy and desirability. So if you're not pretty, you're not petite, uh, you're uh, you're too tall, then it will be difficult for you to find a guy to pair with you. Okay, so that's basically how it goes. Now, the value of the participants is based on heterosexual alliances, and this is reinforced in high school. For example, we have the prom. When you attend the prom, you must have an, a partner, right? Usually the opposite sex. And what happens to the ones who don't have someone asking them to be a partner? They are the brokers. Of course, they do attend, but they are brokers. And then there's the athlete cheerleader or prom king and queen. And then for some people, you have the debut. In our case, it's 18, right? So we call it the coming out. It's like you're announcing to the world that you're available in this heterosexual market. And another is the news escort. Now, even for schools that are exclusive for girls and boys, I remember we had a soiree. So we had a partner school. I studied in St. Teresa's. Our partner school it was Verde School, which is an all-boys school. So we had a soiree in order to meet the opposite sex. Now, this market is the means by which the social order comes to presume heterosexuality, marginalizing and rendering deviant any who do not eventually participate. So here comes those people who are not attractive enough or do not have the value for pairing or alliances with the opposite sex. And who are these? These are the not so pretty, not so smart, maybe overweight, not considering himself as male or uh, female, something like that. So now we emphasize the difference among genders with male and female, or the feminine and masculine, as the standard. And if you don't belong there, then you become marginalized and you are seen as a deviant. And we can see that in our society, not only in high school, but even when we go another another market. So in from the heterosexual market, we come to the developing of desire. And the heterosexual market's goal is for you to eventually find a husband or a wife. So the opposition gains the twist of a complementarity, and where before male and female might have been in conflict, now they are collaborators. So from opposition to opposites attract. So gender becomes the conscious element of desire, and we see this images of the perfect couple not only in advertisement but also in novels, movies, uh, social media, and all the discourses around us. So, what is the perfect couple? The guy is tall, muscular, um, of course, handsome, and then he's together with a woman who is shorter, slim, fair skin, and the girl is looking up at him, and the guy is looking down on her with loving eyes. So, this is the picture that most people have in mind when looking for a partner. So what happens is girls develop the desire to look up to a guy. So I want a tall guy because I want to look up to him. Or the girl learns to be scared so that the guy can protect him, or learns to cry so that he can dry her tears. These are all in the discourses that we see around us. And uh, our desire is patterned from these images. This concentration of desire is an extraordinary powerful force in the maintenance of gender order. This means not only desiring the opposite sex, but also molding oneself as the object of desire for others. Now, this goes not only for male, but not only for female, but for males also. So we see women trying to feel small and delicate, while boys want to feel strong and big so that they can protect the females. So it's not just the females who are actually influenced by these discourses, but also the male. And so you have the diets, hairstyle, whether to shave or not, makeup, all these things uh, contribute to the objectification of a person so that they can become an object of desire for the other, for the opposite sex. And from these desires come consumption, which is also driven by desire. So if desire is gender driven, consumption is also gender driven. So we see women consuming particular products, for example, makeup, clothes, bags, shoes, even furniture, kitchenware. So you would see advertisements targeting the female for these products, while males, for example, cars, leisure activities like drinking, smoking, hiking, biking. So these modes of consumption are all gendered, and this the way we consume is actually as an extension of ourself driven by desire. And when you look at this, you would understand that emotion and desire, which we thought of as natural, are actually structured and learned. Emotions are not natural to humans, they are learned through our interactions with people. For example, love. We were not born knowing what love is. We were structured and uh, taught how to love by our parents, by novels, movies, dramas, and we have this picture of how a person should be loved and should love. And if we don't get it, we feel dissatisfied about ourselves. But yeah, so emotion and desire are not really biological or natural. They are also socially constructed. Men, for example, men control crying. They don't want to show that they're crying in public. Why? Because we have this concept of boys don't cry, and boys are taught that at a young age, while women are tolerated when they display emotions, uh, even in imagined situations, like uh, women crying over a novel or a drama that they watch. So it's okay if women display those emotions, but not if men do the same. Aside from that, gender development does not end with childhood or adolescence, but continues to be transformed as we move into the workplace and as our family status changes. So, uh, what are the usual jobs associated with the female? You have teacher, secretary, nurse, social worker, and then for males, you have the um, lawyers, policemen, and a policeman, engineer, etc. So we become those stereotypes because they are expected of us. So when you get married, for example, you become a wife or a husband. You become a father or a mother. And then the children will become sons and daughters, eldest son, eldest daughter, which are have actually different roles, right? So these categories are expected of us when we change our family status or when we go to our workplace. Now, we are inclined to believe that these habits, preferences, and beliefs are simply results of our own personal history or personal experiences. But in actuality, they are results of our place in the social order. So, for example, uh, middle class female will have different experiences with an upper class female. Okay, so even though they have the same gender, they still have different experiences. So it depends on the social order and reflects our exposure to norms, expectations, and opportunities that are all related to gender, but not only gender, but also our other social categories. So aside from gender, uh, your social class, your age, your ethnicity, etc. So all of these come into play when we go out in the world coming from adolescence. Now, gender interacts with other hierarchies based in such socially constructed categories as class, age, ethnicity, and race, we find, for example, sexualized racism and racialized sexism. And gender is a system that justifies all these inequalities. Um, these inequalities are actually brought about by the prestige structure. And who has the prestige? Of course, the male. So that's what happens. Now, when we talk about the principle, so let's summarize first the principles behind gender construction that I have discussed. First, gender is learned. We are not born with it. Next, gender is collaborative. We do not get to be gendered all by ourselves. The adults, our peers, our school, and other institutions help us to become help help us to become gendered. And then gender is not something we have, but something we do. As I said a while ago, it's a performance. Whenever you do something, you are gendering. Like when I wear my hair like this, I'm gendering myself. When I wear lipstick, I'm gendering myself. And lastly, gender is asymmetrical. Because of the power relations between males and females, there is always oppression, and most often than not, the female is on the oppressed side, and there is always inequality brought about by gender. Now, convention and ideology play a part in gendering and also in the use of language in gendering. The power of convention or custom lies in the fact that we simply learn ways of being and ways of doing things without considering any reason behind them. Now, people think that conventions are timeless and necessary, even if we know that conventions change through time. So, for example, the use of Mr. and Mrs. Okay, we always say Mr. and Mr. first before Mrs. We don't say Mrs. and Mr. Right? Or husband. I now pronounce you husband and wife, not wife and husband. Now, what does it show? That male is given the privilege and the prestige over women. Another example would be the use of the man's surname when a woman gets married. Although now we have a choice not to use the man's surname, but still, a lot of people think because it's a convention that we have to follow it. And I remember when I was in high school, I practiced my signature using my boyfriend's surname. Okay, so because as I said a while ago, the goal of the heterosexual market is for a pair to get married, which is also an institution in itself. Okay. Now, ideology, on the other hand, is the system of beliefs by which people explain, account for, and justify their behavior and interpret and assess that of others. So, for example, uh, if a woman uh, if a woman does domestic chores, you think it's natural, and nobody thinks, why should I do this? Why wouldn't you do that? Talking to a male, but because of the patriarchal ideology, we just think it's the way it is, and it justifies the behavior of others. So, for example, the husband works, the woman stays at home. When the man comes home, the woman prepares his food, etc. Or even if the woman the modern woman is a working woman, still when she gets home, she does all those domestic chores, right? Because of this ideology that tells us that this is the way you should do things. And also, we use these ideologies to interpret and assess the actions of others. So, for example, uh, you see uh, a guy uh, with, a muscular guy helping a woman, and we say, dapat lang kasi mas ano siya, mas malakas siya, something like that, as if it's natural. Okay? And if he doesn't do that, he will be judged by others. Or, for example, let's take the side of the husband. If a husband does not earn enough income for his family, then he will be seen as irresponsible and not doing his duty to his family. So yeah, the men are also trapped in this kind of ideology, like an eldest son, for example, or an eldest child should take care of the family when the parents pass away. So what if I'm a male eldest child and I don't want to do that? Why is it my responsibility? What about my other siblings? Something like that. So yeah, ideology justifies all these behaviors. Now, gender ideology is the set of beliefs that govern people's participation in the gender order, and by which they explain and justify that participation. And we look at these dichotomies of male, female, strong, weak, brave, uh, coward, aggressive, passive, sex-driven, sex star, no, not sex star, sex driven, relationship driven, rational, irrational. So those are dichotomies associated with male and female. And these dichotomies, or what we call the binary oppositions, are very powerful because they permeate uh, the representations of things in our society. So we often hear the terms opposite sex, battle of the sexes, the better half. So we are like in this binary opposition, not since the time we were born. Okay? And we are always uh, trapped in this dichotomous relationship with the other gender. But we forget to see that uh, there is there are other things in between these dichotomies. So for example, male, female, there are people who don't consider themselves male or female. And so we have the LGBT, or black and white. There are other hues in between black and white. And that's why these dichotomies should forever be deconstructed for us to make our own meanings of the world, instead of accepting the gendered ideology that was brought upon us by our parents, the school, and the other institutions that work on us for us to be gendered. Okay, so let's go to ideology, belief, and dominance. Now, the term naturalization is often associated with ideology. This happens when a dominant ideology typically owes its success not to brute power and conscious imposition, but to the ability to convince people that it's not, in fact, a matter of ideology at all, but simply natural, the way things are, like what I said a while ago. So women belong in the kitchen. They have to cook for their family, and it's their responsibility. But if men cook, they get credit for it. They get praised for it. Why? Because it's not considered their natural role as male. But and then, for example, a secretary makes coffee and do errands for the boss, which are not actually part of her job description. But we think it's just the way things are. So it's just normal. Okay, so that's what we mean by naturalization. We don't look at it as ideology. We look at it as it has been the practice for a long time. So you just accept it. Mm. Another example would be if a female uh, is promiscuous and has sexual relationships with many, she's called a slut. But if a male does that, they're even proud of it, right? Is there a male counterpart for slut? Even if there is, it's not seen as negative as slut. For example, fuckboy, okay, or macho, or what's the other term? Casanova. It's even glamorized. But if it's a female, you're just a slut. You're a slut, okay? And it's not positive. Now, uh, looking at the LGBT, for example, if they do not conform, of course, to the male-female dichotomy, then they cannot do things the way they are, so they are considered deviants, and that is why they cannot also have the rights of male and female. And again, ideology, especially gender ideology, causes this inequality not only between man and woman, but all the other genders in between. People's beliefs and views of the world are based on their position in society. So it's not only about gender, it's also about your position, whether your socioeconomic position, your occupation, your ethnicity. All of these affect how you view the world. So let's take, for example, a person who is below the poverty line, hasn't seen doesn't even know what a bidet is, because they don't have a bathroom, right? So their worldview is different because of their position in society. Now, discourses of gender refer to the working of a particular set of ideas about gender in some segment or segments of society. Again, this emphasizes that gender works in not only it's not only about the difference between male and female, but it is associated with the other areas of society and other institutions of society aside from school and marriage. So you have church, you have government, and the labor force. Now, speaking of institutions, categories such as age, class, gender, and ethnicity exist on paper because they are built into our formal institutions. What does it mean? When you interact or transact with different institutions, you are asked to write your name, age, address, and all those information. And when you write those information, or when those types of information are asked of you, then it will determine your rights, your civil status, and your obligations. So, for example, you write there married, then you assign a civil status to yourself, which is, of course, assigned also by another institution, right? So, if that is your civil status, you are married, then you have several rights based on that status. For example, you will have maternity leave, paternity leave. You can use your PhilHealth uh, when your husband is sick, something like that. Okay, and it also uh, affects your rights. If you're male and or female, you can get married. If you're not one of those, you can't. At least in our country. And again, this gendered ideology oppresses other people because it tells us what rights we have. So when we list down this information in forms, government forms, school forms, we are already being assigned our rights, our civil status, and our obligations. Informal institutions also are established practices such as baby showers, sweet 16 parties, flag parties. They all reinforce the gender order. Of course, if you are heterosexual, you are able to participate in these informal institutions. But if you're not, then you don't belong in these institutions, and that is where the marginalization comes in. What if I'm uh, I'm gay and I have a partner and we want a child also? We cannot proudly do a baby shower because society just, why are you doing a baby shower? You're not even allowed to have a baby, something like that. So yeah, these, whether the formal or informal institutions, they all work together to marginalize certain groups of people. Now, language and gender, how are they connected? Gender is a construct that is reinforced through language. Uh, the world has prescribed the male gender as the default. So we have words such as mankind that includes everybody, whether you're male or female, and then human. Okay? So when you use, for example, um, everyone, one of the participants is late, and then the pronoun that you use for one would be he. That was of course in the past, right? Because historically, male is the default. Uh, we also have, for example, occupations that are that are actually gender neutral. For example, doctor, actor, lawyer. They are gender neutral, but people still think of them as gender. Like a doctor would be thought of as male, and a teacher would be thought of as female, because uh, our language affects the way we view the world and also the way we think. The gender structure of the language we're speaking will have the effect of making us more or less aware of gender. So there are languages which are heavily gendered. For example,
Recording
Spanish.
stopped.
Spanish is,
Recording in progress.
I'm hearing something. Recording stopped. Recording in progress. Okay. So Spanish is a heavily gendered language because their nouns and pronouns are gendered. So a table has a gender, right? It's a table is female. Okay, la mesa. So la also the article also is gendered. So if it's female, la. If it's male, el. Now with that kind of language, the speakers would of course be always aware of gender because even non-living things have a gender. Now Tagalog uh, is not so gendered when it comes to pronouns, right? We don't have she or he. We just have siya, right? And I think it's good. It's a good thing that our pronouns are not gendered. Okay, now the naming, I already discussed naming a while ago. Like naming uh, uh, reinforces uh, gender difference and gendering, not only because you are labeled by a particular name that is supposed to be for a girl or for a boy, but also it changes, it transforms your identity from just a person to a named person. In other words, you become labeled as something, okay? More so when your father's surname is attached to your name. So for example, I'm Mycah Carao, the daughter of Felix Carao. Okay, so naming is also like a way of showing that you are a property of somebody. It's like putting what do you call this, a mark on a cow. I don't know if you have seen this. Some animals in the farm, they have the mark of the initials of the owner, right? So it's like branding. Okay, so naming is a form of branding, which shows that you are like a property of somebody. And then categorization into male or female, and then the LGBTQ. Now, I used to think uh, it's great that we now have terms for other genders like the LGBTQ. Uh, but thinking more deeply about it and looking at how gender is socially constructed, I'm hoping for a time that LGBTQ will no longer be a necessary categorization for anyone. We are just all people, right? Because yes, it somehow uh, puts the some people who are not male and female in the map. They are LGBT, but actually it reinforces the difference. You're LGBT because you're not male and female, right? And I hate that categorization. Why can't we just all be people? Okay, but of course I don't know when that will happen because of course the LGBTQ plus, I'm sure they want to be part of this uh, the discourses that the males and females are privileged to have. But then again, they also have their own discourses, right? Because they have different experiences. So there, that's why I was saying I wish that one day we don't even have to categorize people according to their gender because I don't think it's a necessary categorization. Okay. Other examples of categorization, you're categorized as a mother or a father, a daughter, an uncle, an aunt. So all these categorizations are also gendered, right? And each categorization, you are um, given certain roles that you have to follow. Now we come now to the last of my slides, which is the myths of Mars and Venus. You probably have heard of men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and they have several claims about men and women in general, and particular in the way they use language. And Cameron uh, says that these differences are actually myths. So what's the first myth? That language and communication matter more to women than to men. In other words, they're saying women talk more than men, and it's because of their biological construction. But what Cameron is saying is that this is a myth because according to numerous studies, men talk more than women. Why? Because they have more status in the society. They have higher uh, ranks in terms of jobs. For example, more politicians are male dominated. CEOs, managers, most of them are males, right? And they talk more because of that certain position and status that they have. So it's not true that women talk more. But if you go to the domestic sphere, of course, women talk more. Why? Because it's their assigned sphere, right? The society assigned them to the domestic sphere. And so they talk more in that area. But considering all the areas that male and female and other genders can go to, it is always dominated by male, and therefore they talk more than women. And when they say women talk more than men, they actually mean women talk too much, and it has some some degree of disapproval from people. You talk too much, okay? Women talk too much, madagdal ka, something like that. So it's seen as negative. But if men talk more, it's seen as positive because they are powerful, they are aggressive, and they have the language facility, etc. Another myth is women are more verbally skilled than men. Although I want to, I want to believe this, but uh, actually, it's not true. It's a myth. Based on the study of uh, Hyde, he looked into many researches on the verbal ability of men and women and compared them. Okay, and if you look at the the degree of significance, some are close to zero, some are very small. So there's no significant difference between the verbal ability of men and women, except probably for spelling, which is moderate, and smiling, which is moderate. Women smile more, okay, and women are better at spelling. But generally speaking, it's not true that women are better at verbal communication, or they are more skilled verbally. Next, men's goals in using language tend to be about getting things done, whereas women's tend to be about making connections to other people. Now, according to Cameron, it's not this way because of biological difference, but it's about the jobs that women take, which are associated with empathy, like what I mentioned a while ago: teacher, nurse, social worker. So these jobs are nurturing. Okay, but these jobs given to women or taken by women is not because they are women, and it's not natural. It's assigned by culture and society. So it's actually the gender categorization of jobs and is not associated with nature. So it's not natural, it is constructed by society. Fourth, men's way of using language is competitive, reflecting their general interest in acquiring and maintaining status, while women's use of language is cooperative, reflecting their preference for equality and harmony. Again, this is a myth, and it is not a natural occurrence among men and women. What it actually means is that the relationship between man and woman is not only about difference, but it is about power. So, why are men seen as competitive and have interest in acquiring and maintaining status? Because they have the power in society. And why do women use language uh, in a cooperative manner? Because that is how they are brought up. That is how they were taught by the family and other institutions. And so it's not based on their difference actually. It's based on the power struggle between men and women. And finally, the last myth, these differences routinely lead to miscommunication between the sexes, with each sex misinterpreting the other's intentions. Again, the difference between the biological difference between men and women is not directly related to miscommunication among the sexes. As I mentioned a while ago, well, in the early age, you are already being gendered, separated in peer groups, and therefore you learn different ways of doing, different ways of talking, and different ways of interpreting. And this is not because you are male or female, but because of uh, social cultural reasons. So, in conclusion, language both reflects and shapes how we think and how we experience the world, including our notions of power and gender. Hence, we must work towards language awareness and language use that promotes diversity as well as inclusivity. I know that these days, we uh, some people are into gender inclusive language, for example, pronouns. If you uh, identify yourself as a he or a she, and then that is how people should address you, or uh, instead of Miss or Mrs. MX, things like that. So gender inclusivity in terms of language is slowly being uh, understood by people, and even the United Nations has some guidelines on how to use gender inclusive language. But then again, what about the rest of the population who are not really into these new trends in language use? We go back to the segregation of society, not only according to gender, but according to the other aspects like socioeconomic status, educational attainment, and so on. So we need to continually talk about this, spread the conversations about language diversity and inclusivity, so that in the future, as I said, we don't need to label anyone as male, female, or LGBT. We are just all people. These are my references, and thank you very much for listening.
Wow, what an enlightening talk, Miss Chavez. I'm sure all our listeners right now learned more than just a thing or two from you today about the differences between language and sex and the issues surrounding these. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. But, folks, we are not yet done. We have with us third year students from the course Language, Gender, and Power Section 1 to share some of their reactions and musings about the talk. May I call on Joshua Romano to share some of his insights? Whenever you're ready, Joshua.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Ms. Chavez. So, yung webinar po, no, it makes to set my features to realize that the word, it's not the word it is what it is, but we make the word what it is by what we do, but by what we choose. We are always choosing, all of us. So, having this realization, no, I believe that the ability to think a solution for this issue is truly is truly a test for an intelligent person. No? Let me explain myself. No? According to Richard Addington, in the status of criticism in the Philippines, no, perhaps the really dangerous thing in modern life is that people without mind try to use these tools and methods of those who have mind. So what is my point? Lahat ng discussion na to nag-revolve sa language, lahat. Starting from gender construction, lahat sa language acquisition dahil sa mga bata. Tayo ang may fault. Tayo ang mga responsable dito. Pero, in terms of solving this, parang magiging mahirap siya, no? Na may nabasa ako sa one of the articles sa British Psychology Society, no, na sinasabi ang traditional masculinity clearly reflects host of values, beliefs, and behaviors. Pero meron din tong disadvantage, no? From what I remember sa discussion ni Sir Perseus and mga classmate ko nagko-converse, nasabi nila na men are scared to strong and independent women. Na nagsasabi na tunay ito, no? Maraming ganong lalaki dahil siguro napaka-toxic na ng masculinity. So, ang sa akin lang talaga, parang mahirap, lalo na sa generation natin, lalo na sa Philippines, no? Hindi pa masyadong welcome ang LGBTQ tsaka sa feminism. To be honest, parang fortunate pa nga ako na nandito ako dahil ngayon ko lang nalalaman itong mga ito na most of us na mga men na hindi talaga alam itong mga bagay na ito. Dahil naglilito na parang magkakos din to ng parang problem. Kasi from what I remember sa discussion ni Sir Per, we have narrative power. So ideologies yun na continuous na nag-evolve or patuloy na lumalaganap sa ating society, no? So ayun sa akin lang talaga parang napakahirap na mabago itong o ma-solve yung issue na ito kasi hindi rin enough na inform yung mga lalaki na oy ito yung issue na kailangan ito para ma-lessen yung inequality or the racism. Doon marami na rin nakita kong solution, no? One of them is correct me na lang po, no, if mali po ako, yung the Magna Carta of Women, RA 9710, na ang goal is eliminate the discrimination and to protect the women. So yun nga, ayun lang po yung sa akin, Ma'am Mycah.
All right. Thank you, Joshua, for your reactions and insights about the talk and about the issue. Up next, may I call on Desiree Banyares to let us in on her thoughts about the talk. The floor is yours, Des.
Hello, am I being heard fine?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so I'll just basically give also a quick summarization of what happened for the discussion for today. In the definitions of sex and gender, we clearly how Ma'am Chavez emphasizes these terms as floating artifices, and basically that these terms are not prediscursive, meaning that these ideas exist only upon the structure of language and society, that it is not decided by creation itself that one is the other and one is the major or the general. This discussion specifically reminds me of how Simone de Beauvoir specifically states how one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. We talked about the separation and differences, which is, of course, hyperimposed in our socializations. Mom Chavez gives the examples of parental affirmations, playtime, peer validation, expected ambitions, and later on, even in our marriage and careers. This shows us, of course, that the small details in our schooling, upbringing, and relationships are not actually as small as they seem, because it is also rooted from a restrictive social order and later stabilizes the same power over structure. It forms, fuels, and reinstates an ideology, one that is used to generate a coherent performance of sex and gender, and we are led to believe this division is natural, when in fact it is not, as Mom Chavez has proven early on. And even deeper, of course, the commodification of the sex, which heavily relies on the ability of someone to conform to the definitions of the unrealistic binary, or that the feminine and masculine, but only within a matrix of heterosexuality. And even those of us in the homosexual spectrum can relate probably how this same characterization of the feminine and masculine still makes itself in conversations of gender. We have to perform emotions, desire, and behaviors in our indicated categories. And in Ma'am Chavez's discourse class last year, I remember specifically how we talked about identity and how this identity does not end within the self, because there is an essential point in the conversation where you have to acknowledge the importance of recognition in being visible for who you are, and the world acknowledging the fact that you identify a certain way and allowing you to assert your humanization in society by policy, by rights, and so on. The heterosexual dichotomies to Ma'am Chavez reminds me very similarly to Judith Butler's discussion of the coherence of gender identity, which I guess pattern-wise is easier to understand when you think about it as the man must be masculine and attracted to the woman, and the woman must be feminine and attracted to the man. Diba? This is our standard of heterosexuality. This is the coherence of gender identity. And in this specific spectrum, many are removed from the idea of coherence. Therefore, many are dehumanized. Because if you are not coherent, you are not understood, you are not perceived, then the world will not be able to create a policy and a space that is inclusive of you. So the concept of palogocentrism makes itself very clear as well, which was also discussed earlier on, wherein the male and masculine being the general. In pronouns and vocabulary, we see this very clearly, and thus also in imagery and perception. That when we mention the idea of a person, the first thing we see is a man. When we talk about humankind, the man is there. The man is primary and therefore the general. He is a mister and will always be a mister. I am a miss and will at some point become a missus. And this is not a decision that I am making, but rather a decision that has been decided for me by a phallogocentric society, imposing the generalization of men as the default or the neutral. Thus, in conversations of gender, like Ma'am Chavez says and emphasizes, in trying to afford us a solution. And I understand, of course, what my fellow student Joshua was saying, that it does seem very difficult and it does seem very complicated, but that is the price of deconstruction. I believe that the journey to liberation is not going to be easy, of course, especially because we are trying to acknowledge a problem that is systematized, that is institutionalized and logicalized, and it is policized, and everything with the size that goes there, it is included in our daily lives, in the way we perceive other people, the way we are raised, in our language most especially. Thus, there is a call for the deconstruction, like I said earlier, and a call for inclusive coalitions that recognizes intersectionality, the idea that gender also coexist with other matters, such as your position as a post-colonial woman, your position as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, your race, your economic status, because of course, as we know, poverty in women specifically and in the LGBT community also impact them in a different way, because they are not just disenfranchised from financial access, but also by recognition of society. And therefore, they're ostracized for several things all at once. So there is a call for liberating education that allows us to trace and reclaim the power of subjective identities. And even more so, reclamation and language by the way of personal, by the way of institutions, and also in policy in a political spectrum. So I guess I'll include in this specific statement as well how important the next election will be. I believe that and offering a solution, of course, is that we hope to have more representation in our political venues, in our educational system, and the way that we are going to be represented in our society as a people. So that is from your local institutions all the way to your national institutions. And I urge everyone here who is still not registered to, of course, start voting and to start researching on who you're voting as well, because that's also very important. And to hopefully help women and help the LGBTQ plus community solve the problem of gender exclusion and differentiation. And join us in this journey, I guess, and let's keep going, because it's a very long way, I understand. But in the end, hopefully this will all be worth it for all of us to be humanized in ways that we want to be seen and perceived and visible to our society. So thank you very much for attending and listening today. And thank you so much to Ma'am Chavez for once again giving me substantial information that I can include to my feminist identity. Thank you so much for teaching us and being with us and giving us another perspective on how discoursal relationships are important in recognizing gender and reclaiming power. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for that, Desiree. Now, to start the open forum, I am giving the virtual floor to the Vice President of ELC, Abigail Lapada, and their Creative Officer, Criza.
Thank you, Ate Cyrene. Thank you, Ma'am Chavez, for your wonderful insights. Now, I would like to formally open our question and answer portion. You may open your mic or send your questions through our chat box. So we will wait for your questions. Thank you. A question from a participant po, Ma'am Chavez. Is it really necessary for a woman or man to first appear as or manifest the socially constructed standard or perfection, like the man should be tall, muscular, and handsome, and the woman should be shorter, pretty, and slim in order to be an object of desire?
Okay, as I said, it's gender, it's socially constructed to for women and men to behave like that so that they will desired by the opposite sex. But it's not necessary actually, if you ask me. However, we also look at how society behaves and looks at women and men and the institutions also that are around us. So for example, society tells us that a heterosexual person should get married someday. Now, in order for you to get married, you have to be valuable. To be valuable, you have to look good, etc. That is what society tells us. Now, if you don't want to follow that, what will happen? Nobody will desire you, right? Or maybe if you're lucky, you will meet someone who will eventually ask you to marry him, her, whatever. But the thing is, like your schoolmate said a while ago, it's so difficult to get out of this structure because it's so ingrained in our society. If you're going to ask me if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't get married because marriage itself is a very oppressive institution. You change your name, you change your identity, you have these responsibilities, etc. So it's still up to you. It's still up to you as a person. Knowing all these now, would you want to be part of the heterosexual market? Would you want to wear, uh, if you're a woman, would you want to wear lipstick and, trim your eyebrows so that you would look attractive to others? It's your own decision. Knowing this now, would you still want to attract the opposite sex as society wants you to do? We all have our choices. And as I said a while ago, all these gendered performances are available to everybody. But the thing is, society tells you who can do which. But will you allow them to dictate to you what you should do? And then you will become a deviant? Or you just follow what society tells you to do. You're a heterosexual, you should get married someday, so you should look good now to attract, to be marketable in the heterosexual world. Okay, now why are we even talking about this? Because now we have a choice, right? Knowing this, we have a choice. I don't want to get like me. As I said, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't get married. I don't want to be Mycah Chavez. I want to be Mycah. I don't even want to be Mycah Chavez because that means I'm a daughter of my father. Do you get what I'm saying? So yeah, knowing this gives you a choice. But which choice will you make for yourself? That's the question that you need to answer for yourself.
Thank you for that wonderful answer, Ms. Chavez. Now I will give the floor to our creative officer, Kriza, for another question.
The next question would be, do you think the LGBTQ plus community is already accepted here in the Philippines, or are they merely just being tolerated?
I think some people would say they are accepted, but in reality, they are not. They are accepted if they do well in society, like they get good jobs, they are not scandalous, then they're tolerated. But if for example they do something not in the not in the guidelines, then they are seen as a cancer of society or something. Filipinos, some Filipinos are so hypocritical that they say, okay, we accept the LGBT, but at the back of their minds, they don't want their sons and daughters to be part of the LGBT. That's why we need to open our minds and also make others aware of these things.
Thank you, ma'am. And another question po, what are your views about transgender women? Kung real women po ba sila talaga or not?
If they think they are women, then they are. As I said, society, science told us that we are male and female based on our genitals, right? But that is not natural at all, as I already explained a while. So if a transgender woman, for example, says she's a woman, then she's a woman. Who are you to tell her otherwise? Are you God? No, just kidding.
A participant would like to know po yung stand niya po regarding the SOGI bill po.
The SOGI bill should be passed. It's not about discrimination between male and female anymore. It's about giving equal rights to everybody. And if everybody is given equal rights, then everybody will be protected. Because some sectors of our society are not protected by our laws. So if the Sochi bill is passed, I hope the same-sex marriage bill, if there's a bill, will also be passed so that we can truly say that we are in a society that looks at everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. And another question po from a participant. What are your implications about BL and GL series nowadays?
I think they started to be revolutionary, right? Because in maybe several years ago, you hardly can see representation of the LGBT in the movies or in the TV industry. And whenever they are represented, for example, the gays are shown as screaming gays. Right? They are shown as the stereotypes of the LGBT. But now with these different GL and PL series, it started as revolutionary, of course, because now we have a representation of the experiences of the LGBT. But then, as years pass, it now as the industry, the BL and the GL industry has been also commodified, right? So the artists are being sold like products, and yeah, so they are, if the male female have the heterosexual market, now there is this LGBT market where they are also being valued, right? If, for example, in the PL scenario, for example, one must also be feminine, right? There is also this stereotype of the BL couple. One is taller, the other one is slimmer and more feminine looking. So even if the LGBT is being represented, you can still see that there is this patriarchal influence, even in supposedly liberating forms of art. Okay, and it's sad because I used to think that it's revolutionary, but now as I watch some of these BL and GL series, I can see the patriarchal gaze in there, constantly watching.
Next question po. What is their opinion about having separate bathrooms for transgenders?
Again.
What is their opinion about having separate bathrooms for transgenders?
I don't think they should have separate bathrooms. Separate bathrooms is a reinforcement of the difference between genders, and it's oppressive, right? So if you are a transgender woman, then you should go to female's bathroom. And why is there even a distinction between female bathroom and male bathroom? So it reinforces gender difference.
Mr. Kudo po is raising his hand.
Hi, Mycah.
Yes.
Hi, Mycah. I have a question po.
Go ahead.
Okay po. So, yung in your presentation a while ago, it was you mentioned something about baby showers. and I find it relevant and timely because I was invited to one. And I would just like to know what is your personal take on, people continuing to having these parties like baby showers, gender reveals. Yeah.
Well, as I said, talking about a gender construction makes you aware of how gender is constructed and also gives you a choice of how you will participate in the gendering because you cannot escape it, right? You cannot escape it. It's part of our society. It's ingrained in all our activities. I like that informal institution of baby showers. Now, if if the parents want to have a baby shower, then it's their right, which was also dictated by them being assigned as male and female became parents, right? You cannot just tell them, hey, you're participating in the gendering of your child. We can't do that, right? Because aside from conversations about gender, we also have to take into consideration culture, and culture includes rituals. And these rituals make us part of a community. So, uh, should you attend the baby shower? Should they give a baby shower? It's a ritual that you uh, cannot ask them to stop doing. This ritual makes them part of a community uh, of would-be parents, and I think it's a psychological need of a person, which again is dictated by the society, but we cannot erase those things from our brains. I'll give you another example. For example, Christmas. Okay, I'm not a Catholic. I don't have a religion. Therefore, I shouldn't be celebrating Christmas. But Christmas is the celebration of Christmas is a ritual that I do with my family. It brings us together. It makes us happy. It makes us reminisce all our good memories when we talk during the Noche Buena. So if I'm not a religious person, the logical thing to do is not to celebrate Christmas, right? But as a person who loves my family, I want this ritual to go on. So I celebrate Christmas, not thinking of why it's being celebrated, but I like the ritual of eating with my family and having a festive mood during a particular time of the year. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ma'am Mycah.
A question po from Sainik Canadero. Men reacts on Pacquiao's statement about third sex na mas masahol pa sila sa hayop. This affects to many. Do you think Pacquiao would be a good public figure, knowing also his background about boxing?
Well, Pacquiao, now talking uh, from an educated perspective, I cannot say anything about him except uh, I feel bad that he was brought up in such an environment to look at other people that way while saying that he is a religious person, because he is very religious, right? He's proud of his faith, and yet he looks at not only the third sex but other people in a certain way, even condemning others. Now, We have to understand why people are like that. And we go back to what I said a while ago. You grow up in a society with within a certain position, social position. Okay, and you are not only gendered but also socialized. So your beliefs, your activities, the things that you say are all influenced by several factors. So I cannot just tell him he's stupid, he's like this, like that. No, from a perspective of someone who just talked about ideology, he is a perfect example of how ideology can work on the mind of a person and and change or influence how he behaves and how he speaks about it. So that's all I can say about him. I cannot even judge him, right? Because it's not his fault that he's like that. Society made him like that. The place where he lived, the school where he studied, his experiences as a person, as a boxer, as a politician made him like that, right? So yeah, I cannot really judge him.
Second to the last question po is from Alex Ibanez po. How can we express gender neutrality in academic writing po?
Okay, in academic writing, there are actually guidelines, as I said, given by the United Nations. So first, instead of saying, for example, he or she, use the plural form they. So it's now acceptable, like when you say anyone or someone, and then the next pronoun they instead of he, that, slash she. Because if you use he slash she, it's still not gender inclusive, right? So you just use the they. Or for possessives, for example, instead of saying her, use an article. For example, her project. Instead of her project, use the project. Okay? And then if you're not sure whether to refer to someone as male or female, then you just use the plural.
And for the last question po, a participant from our FB Live, the of this is from Ariel Martinez Alba. The question is why LGBTQ plus is difficult to accept here in our country. What is the problem about it?
Well, it's not only in our country, but in other places around the world. The LGBTQ is not easy to accept, and it's because of the patriarchal ideology that has been practiced by a lot of people in the world. And an ideology, as I said a while ago, is something that operates within us, and we think it's normal. We think it's just the way it is. That's why it's difficult for people to accept them, even if we are already educated about gender, inclusivity, diversity. Still, we would find it difficult to accept them, primarily because ideology. It's here. It's here in our brains. I hope there's a machine that can remove ideology in brains, but it's there. So it will take a lot of time, as Desiree said a while ago. It will take a long, long time before the LGBT fully accepted. Remember, feminism had a long, 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 long journey, and still women have are still being oppressed until now, right? Although feminism has been there for a long time, we've been fighting for our rights, but still women are oppressed. Why? Because of this patriarchal ideology.
Thank you, Ma'am Chavez, for answering the questions of our participants and educating us about issues on language, power, and gender in our society. Now I am giving the floor to our moderators.
Hello, it's me again, folks. It is now due time that we give out our deep appreciation to our speaker. To award the gift certificate, may I call on the academic org representative of ELC, Jethro Bautista.
Good afternoon. So that was really a lot of discussion going on today regarding language, gender, and power in society. So now, as the FEU English Language Circle shows its gratitude and appreciation, we would like to present Ms. Chavez a certificate of recognition. So the Far Eastern University Institute of Arts and Sciences, the certificate of appreciation is awarded to Ms. Mycah Amelita C. Chavez for her valuable contribution as speaker during the webinar entitled Issues on Language, Power, and Gender in Society, given this 25th day of September 2021 at Far Eastern University, Manila. Signed by Dr. Emmanuel S. Gonzalez, the Chair of the Department of Language and Literature, Dr. Rowena Capulong Reyes, the Dean of the Institutes of Arts and Sciences, and finally, Mr. Percius Sagabalog, the advisor of the FEU English Language Circle. Thank you very much, Ms. Chavez.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And as for attendees here in this webinar and those watching through Facebook Live, please expect your certificates via email soon. Thank you for coming and supporting our event, and we hope to see you around again next time. Also, don't forget to answer the evaluation, which is located in the chat box for this webinar for us to know your feedback. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Chavez.
All right, now it's about time we wrap this up. I feel like it is only right to give that privilege to the advisor of English Language Circle, Mr. Perseus Balog. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Cyrene. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. So first and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the Institute of Arts and Sciences, the Department of Language and Literature, officers of English Language Circle, and my students from my class Language, Gender, and Power for organizing and supporting this webinar. I truly appreciate your efforts, support, and participation to this event. Also would like to thank Ms. Amira Milano, our coordinator for Gender and Development Desk, for accepting our invitation to do the opening remarks. And of course, to Ms. Mycah Chavez, our speaker, thank you very much for a very informative and insightful discussion on issues on language, power, and gender. We truly appreciate your time, knowledge, and expertise in the field of language and gender studies. Indeed, your lecture has given us deeper understanding about the pivotal role of language in manifesting power and gender issues. In this webinar, we'll learn the differences between sex and gender, ways how we are gendered according to how children are treated, the words we use and things we do, the uniform prescribed by schools, concepts of heterosexual market that leads to marginalization of other people who don't conform to certain social standards, process how gender development transforms as we move into the workplace and as our family status changes, thus leading to gender stereotyping and inequalities. And lastly, the connection of language and gender and the importance of gender inclusive language. I hope that what we have learned from this webinar would inspire us to do research on language and gender studies. And most importantly, encourage us to use language in giving voice to the voiceless, platform to the unrepresented, and space to the marginalized members of our society. Once again, thank you very much for joining us in this webinar. Okay, Sayuri.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Once again, thank you to our speakers and thank you to everyone who participated and sent in their thoughts about the talk today. We hope you learned a thing or two today. We hope you are more enlightened about language and the issues that surround gender and how the two are interconnected. We will see you again in the next webinars by the English Language Circle, and we hope you have a good day. Thank you very much.
Hello po. Let's have a photo op po before we leave. Thank you. Ayan. The PowerPoint po. Yeah. Okay, I will count to 3. So give us your best smiles. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Ayan, isa pa po. 1, 2, 3. Ayan. Thank you po.
Thank you, ELC.
Thank you po.
And Sir Balo, thank
Thank you
you.
po, Miss
Thank you,
Mycah.
Mycah.
Salamat po.
Thank
See
you,
you
sir.
again.